Namaste, hi yogis, welcome to my channel. My name is Kassandra and today I'm doing a yoga class that has been heavily requested. This practice will help to get you into lotus pose. Now, I want to start off by saying that for most people, lotus pose is not a great pose to do. I very rarely teach this asana, and that's why I've never really I don't think I've ever done a yoga class on YouTube that used lotus pose, because for most people, it is incredibly harmful and hard on their knees. However, this is not the case for everyone. Some people can do lotus pose in a way that is very comfortable, very easy, and that works for their anatomy. I'm one of those people that it doesn't hurt me at all to do lotus pose, but because I know that that's not the case for everyone, I'm very cautious when and if I do instruct it. So this practice is for those of you that want to try lotus pose. I would say it's intermediate to advanced, not necessarily because we're going to be doing crazy difficult stuff, but just because you need a high level of body awareness to be able to do lotus pose in a way that respects and honors your own body. And just be mindful and try not to put too much expectations on your body. And more important than anything in the world is that if you feel pain, stop. Do not push through the pain for the sake of achieving a yoga pose. I can tell you from experience, it's not worth it, okay? No injury is worth achieving some kind of yoga pose. So we need to kind of check the ego and check vanity at the door. This is purely for the sake of exploring and getting into the hips, and maybe we'll end up going into lotus pose. And if you don't, it's totally fine. You're still a wonderful person and a great yoga practitioner. Okay, I don't normally talk this much at the beginning of a yoga class, but I just felt like it was very important for me to say this. But now I feel like we can begin. So we are going to start with a seated hip opener. So sitting as if you were cross-legged, see if you can bring your right shin in front of your left one. So I'm not crossing one ankle over the other. I'm really just stacking one in front of the other. And there's maybe just like an inch or so between the thighs and between the calves. And then as you inhale, lengthen up, and then we're gonna crawl the palms forward and fold it down. So you might be up a little bit higher if you're already feeling something in your right hip and right glute. My hips are pretty open, especially for external hip rotation, so you might go all the way down like I am. But again, just kind of release your attachment to what you think poses should look like or what your body should be doing in them. It honestly just does not matter. Let's come all the way back in. And before we go to the other side, we'll just take a seated twist. So cross your right ankle over the top of your left thigh, and you can hug your right thigh with your left arm, right fingertips behind you, open the chest. And release to uncross. And let's move into that fold on the other side. Bring your left shin in front of your right shin and folding down. So think of lengthening out of your lower back as you fold. And you might find that one side is a little bit tighter than the other. That's perfectly normal. Connecting to your breath, inhaling and exhaling through the nose. And come all the way back up. Take your twist on the other side, cross your left ankle over your right thigh, hug that left thigh in, left fingertips behind you, open your chest. Pushing down into your big left toe. And let's release. Crossing at the ankles, make your way into your tabletop pose on hands and knees, just for a few rounds of cat and cow. Nice and simple. Spread your fingertips wide here. As you inhale, drop the belly, curl tailbone up. Exhale, round your spine, drop your chin to your chest, tailbone down. Take a few more breaths, a few more rounds. Just warming up the spine, getting those essential spinal movements. Squeeze your shoulder blades when you drop the belly down. Last one here. Big breath in, back bend. Exhale, contract and round. And we'll take our first downward facing dog. So you might need to walk your hands a couple inches past your shoulders before curling the toes under and lifting your hips up and back. And now the hamstrings and low back might be a little tight, so you might want to paddle your feet here, which is what I'm doing. Just bending one knee, straightening the other leg, pushing into the heels, so stretching into the calves, into the ankles, into the hamstrings. Lengthen your arms and get really strong through your arms. Leaning onto your left leg, reach your right leg up to the sky and bend your right knee, opening up your hip. And let your right leg lean all the way over to the left here. So you're getting a nice stretch into the hip flexors. We're really going to target hip flexors and outer hip with this practice. Finding your low lunge, step your right foot forward between your palms to the top of the mat and let your back knee come down to the floor. So right knee is stacked over the ankle, and you can come up onto your fingertips here as you pull the heart forward. Really press the hips forward and down. Find some length in your spine. Moving into your quad stretch, keep your left hand down, bend into that left knee, and you can use your right hand to pull it in. So drawing that the left heel in towards the glute. So the more intense the hip openers are, usually the harder it is to keep breathing. So focus on breath before movement. Let it guide you. Let's carefully release the hold of that back foot. Tuck the back toes under. Lift your back knee off the mat and spin your back foot parallel to the shorter edge of your mat so that you can lift up to your warrior two. So right heel is roughly in line with the back foot, the back arch. And as you bend into your right knee, you're squeezing that knee open, engaging through the glutes. Sink down a little bit deeper. So big external hip rotation here. Shoulders aligned over the hips. Let's reverse left hand down, right arm up. Back to your warrior two. Straighten your right leg, hips go back, lean your chest forward, triangle pose, left arm up. So think of drawing your left shoulder and left hip back, lengthening the palms further away from one another. Push into the feet, come back up. Hands on your hips, turn your right toes in. So both feet are parallel to the shorter edges of your mat. As you inhale, lift and lengthen up. And then exhale, tilt, hinge forward from the pelvis. Take your wide-legged forward fold. Soften your head, soften your neck. Deep breaths here. Pushing firmly through all four corners of both feet. Walk your hands forward to lift chin and chest up, and walk your palms to the front of the mat. Take your runner's lunge. So right toes point forward, keep the back knee lifted, coming up onto the fingertips, let your pelvis be heavy. Stretch even deeper into those hip flexors. And we'll take our first vinyasa from here. So inhaling, plank pose, firm up your core. Exhale, lower down all the way. Point your toes back once you're there. Take a little cobra. Downward facing dog, exhale. Hands are shoulder width distance apart, feet are hip width distance apart or so. Three-legged dog on the other side. Left leg rises, bend your left knee, open up your hip, and really let that left knee lean all the way over to the right. Into your low lunge, step your left foot forward between your palms, back knee to the floor, and I'm just gonna pad my right knee here just because I still have that never-ending bone bruise in that knee. So in that low lunge, pull your heart forward, drop the hips. Notice if there's any tension creeping up in the neck or shoulders that you can let go of. And moving into your quad stretch. Left hand reaches back to catch a hold of the right foot as you pull that heel in towards the glute. So I'm not lifting my hips up to come meet the heel. I'm trying to keep my hips down low and instead pulling the heel in towards me. It changes the stretch quite a bit when we do that. One more big breath here. And carefully release the back foot. You can unroll your mat if you had done that. Lift your back knee off the mat, spin your back foot parallel to the shorter edge of your mat, and push firmly into both legs and both feet to lift up, warrior two. Squeezing that left knee open, trying to keep the pelvis and the hips squared. This is quite challenging. Shoulders over your hips. Stretch out long through your arms. Keep your gaze steady and maybe sink down a little bit lower. Exalt your warrior. Right hand down, left arm up. Back to your warrior two. Straighten your front leg, hips go back, lean your chest forward, triangle pose. Right arm up. Think of drawing your right shoulder and your right hip back. Imagine you can stretch the crown of your head further away from your tailbone. Push into the feet, come all the way back up. Hands on your hips, turn the left toes in. So now both feet are parallel. You want your toes and your heels to be in one long line. As you inhale, stretch and lengthen your spine. Exhale, tilt from the pelvis, fold on down. And whatever you'd like to do with the arms here. This is a great way to decompress your neck and your spine. Maybe shake out the head, yes and no. And walk your palms forward and walk them to the top of the mat for your runner's lunge. Back heel lifts up, left toes point forward. Let your pelvis drop. And we'll take our flow from here. Ground the palms down to the mat. Inhale, plank. Exhale to lower. Point your toes back, cobra. Downward facing dog. From our down dog, reach your right leg up to the sky, bend your right knee, open up your hip, push into that left heel, straighten your arms. Let's come to our high lunge. Right foot forward between the palms, hip width distance apart here with the feet. Push down into the legs to lift on up. Reach the arms up overhead, palms are facing in towards one another. So careful here in these high lunges. It's tempting to let the floating ribs pop forward and to round into the lower back. Try to lengthen tailbone down and keep the floating ribs in. So lots of integrity in our core. Let's bring the hands together at the front of the heart. And we're going to come into a variation of tree pose that utilizes half lotus pose. So step on up to the top of the mat and I'll turn here. So instead of doing tree pose by bringing the left foot to the inside of the right thigh like we normally would and hugging in, you can either choose to stay this way or you can flip it just so you have a half lotus pose here. So the sole of your foot is facing up towards the sky and you're pressing that left knee down. So deep external rotation here. And I like to hold on to the left foot with my right hand, and then you can bring your left arm behind you and hold on to the right elbow. So standing tall through that right leg, hugging into the midline. So already if you're feeling some kind of pinching or pain in your knee, this is your indication that maybe lotus pose is not quite right for your body. And that's perfectly fine. something to be really mindful of. If you had your left arm behind you, bring it forward again onto the hips. We're going to transition from here into our standing pigeon pose. So you can simply cross your left ankle over the top of your right knee and bend into that supporting leg. And I'll turn around here. So as you're bending into that right knee, hands can come forward to the top of the heart or to the front of the heart. Hips are moving back, chest is leaning out in front of you. So this is option one here, or you can go further into the stretch by coming down onto your fingertips. Also makes it a lot easier because you don't have to worry about balancing. Drop your head, a little micro bend here. If you had folded all the way down, you can start to lift back up. Uncross the legs, shake it out, standing at the top of the mat. Let's take our Vinyasa. Inhale, arms reach. Exhale, fold. Halfway lift. Exhale, chaturanga. You can step or hop back. Cobra or upward facing dog. We meet downward dog. Let's reach the left leg up to the sky. Bend your left knee, open up your hip. Push the elbows straight. Push into your right heel. High lunge, left foot forward, back heel rises. So same thing, floating ribs in, tailbone down, low belly is engaged. Find something to focus on here that is not moving to help you out with your balance. Hands come together at the front of the heart. We're gonna step up into that modified tree pose. So standing on your left leg, instead of doing tree pose by pushing the sole of the foot to the inside of the thigh, think of bringing the top of the foot to the top of your left thigh. So sole of my right foot is facing up to the sky, and I'm pushing that right knee down. Holding onto the foot with my left hand, I'm just bringing my right arm behind the low back and holding onto the elbow. Squeezing everything in. And you'll probably notice right away that one side is easier than the other. So for me, this one is a lot easier than the left one was. I have a lot more flexibility on this side and this hip than I do the left hip. And that's not necessarily a huge flaw that needs to be corrected. Sometimes it's just how our pelvis is made and what our anatomy is like. Doesn't mean we can't improve it with consistent practice. Just means that there's no reason to beat ourselves up over it. Into your standing pigeon pose, so bring your right hand to your hip, flex the right foot so you can cross your right ankle over the top of that left knee, hands at the heart. Bend your supporting leg as you bring your hips back, chest forward. This is option one. Option two, fold. Bring the fingertips down. Stretching deeply through that right hip and glute. Let's come all the way back up. Uncross the legs, shake it out. Okay, let's take our flow and then we're really moving into our hip openers. Inhale, arms rise. Exhale, fold it down. Halfway lift. Chaturanga. Upward dog. Downward dog. Right leg rises, bend your knee, open up your hip, and let's find our lizard pose. So step your right foot to the outer edge of your right hand, and we're gonna let the back knee come down to the floor. So I'm just gonna fold up my mat a little bit here just to give a little bit more cushioning. And for this variation, because we are working on external hip rotation, you're gonna curl your right toes up and roll to the outer edge of that right foot. You might choose to stay up nice and high here on your palms, or you can come down onto your forearms. So the arms are there to provide you stability, of course, but try to relax them as much as possible. So using minimal engagement, minimal strength, making this a bit more of a passive pose, so a bit more like a Vinyasa, where we're letting gravity do the work for us. And I really would say that if hip flexibility is something you really struggle with and have a hard time improving, yin yoga is what I would recommend. And I have tons and tons of yin classes on my channel. Take 3 more breaths here on this side. If you are on your forearms, lift back up onto your palms, and we're gonna go from here into our pigeon pose. So you can toe heel your right foot all the way over to the left. Right knee ends up being behind your right wrist. Try to square off your hips so you're not rolling on one side more than the other. And you might choose to stay up here nice and tall, or you fold on down. 5 to 10 breaths here. And this is another one of those poses where we want to use and engage the arms as little as possible. Staying in pigeon pose, just lift your chin and chest back up. And we're gonna come from here into square pose. So you can roll a little bit onto your right hip just to help bring your left leg out in front of you. And I don't know if you heard that, but that was a big hip crack. And hip pop happens all the time to me. So you're gonna be stacking your left knee over the top, your left ankle over the top of your right knee so that your left shin ends up being directly over the top of your right one. If you look down, you want to be able to see a little hole in the shape of a triangle. So both hips, both thighs at about a 45-degree angle, and then one shin stacked on top of the other. Really important to flex the feet here. And depending on how open and flexible your hips are, you might have your shins and ankles and knees touching, or they might be a little bit more like this, which is perfectly fine as well. If this pose isn't working for you, you can repeat what we did at the beginning of class, just bringing your left shin in front of your right one. Otherwise, from your square pose, ground down through the sit bones, lift and lengthen up, and then you can initiate a forward fold from here. Taking some deep belly breaths. This has to be one of my all-time favorite poses in the world. I could stay here forever, but don't worry, we won't. Start to lift the chin and chest back up. And our final pose here that we're gonna do that's amazing if you're trying to prepare for lotus pose is shoelace, or what some people call knee pile, or Gomukhasana, cow face pose. Left knee aligns over the right one, heels are in close towards the glutes. So One option that I've discovered, this pose is quite easy for me. I don't really feel much. So if you do have open hips at home and you don't really feel much from this pose, and even folding forward doesn't really do that much for you, one option and variation that I want to give you, when I was playing around with it, I discovered that if I push my hands onto the top of the knees and I round and contract through the belly, you get a much deeper stretch. And now I can really feel the pose working. So you could do that, or you can simply work on folding over the legs or just staying sitting upright if you're already getting quite a big stretch. But I'm just gonna do the push and tuck in option. Just about 3 to 5 breaths or so here. If you had folded down, you can lift your way back up, and we're gonna bring the hands behind us and just let your legs come out in front. So lots of hip openers here, you're probably feeling it. Just let your knees drop side to side, a little windshield wiper motion. Bringing your hands shoulder width distance apart with your fingertips pointing towards your heels. Bring your heels in and just push into the feet, lift up, reverse table. Hips come down, cross at the ankles. Take your vinyasa. Inhale to plank, chaturanga, upward dog, downward dog. And let's move over onto the second side. Left leg rises, bend your left knee, open up that hip. Lizard pose, left foot to the outer edge of your left hand, and I'm gonna pad my right knee here. Right knee comes down to the ground. So this lizard pose, you're curling the left toes up and rolling to the outer edge of that left foot. So the sole of the foot is not really touching the ground anymore. And you can come down onto your forearms if you would like. Trying to melt the shoulder blades down to the floor. And again, you'll probably notice that one side is more flexible than the other. Just accept it as is, instead of pushing or forcing yourself to have the same experience on both sides. Coming back up onto the palms, into your pigeon pose. So toe heel your left foot over to the right. Left knee behind the left wrist. Right leg stretches out back behind you. And you can fold on down. Make this as passive as you can. Slow, steady breaths in and out through your nose. Lift the chest back up. You're gonna roll onto your left hip just so you can bring your right leg out in front of you again. And we'll take that square pose. I'm just unfolding my mat. So right ankle stacks over the top of your left knee. Flexing the feet helps to protect the knees here. And lifting and lengthening up. Right shin over the left shin, and you can fold on down. And coming back up, our final pose before we move and actually attempt this lotus pose. Gomu Kassandra, cow-faced, or shoelace, or knee pile. Right knee aligns over the left one, heels come in close towards the glutes. And again, you can just either hold here for a few breaths, you can fold belly over your thighs, or if you'd like to intensify the sensation here, you're pushing down into your knees and almost as if you're trying to round and contract like you're doing a cat and cow. And you should immediately feel that through the outer hips. Low belly hugging into the low back. Feels so good. Okay, let's release. Legs out in front of you, and just again do that same little windshield wiper motion with the knees, just unwinding here. Letting it drop side to side. And we'll take that reverse tabletop pose again, so palms flat to the mat, push down into the feet, lift the pelvis up. And setting the hips back down, let's take our final vinyasa. Palms down, plank pose, inhale. Chaturanga. Upward dog. Downward dog. And let's set our feet down to the ground. Okay, and our hips down, we are ready to attempt lotus pose. So if your knees feel good from that sequence, you might be okay in lotus, but remember, if it starts to hurt, just back out. It's not worth pushing and forcing yourself into this shape. So crossing, we'll do both sides. Crossing the right foot, it's the same thing that we did in that tree pose variation. You're trying to bring the top of your foot to the top of your thigh. So the sole of my right foot is now facing up towards the ceiling, and you might stay here working on your half lotus pose. If there's any kind of pain or discomfort in the knee, you can play around a little bit by lifting and turning the shin a little bit and the calf muscle. But again, we're not trying to force anything, so it's possible that this just doesn't work for your knees. If you'd like to progress further, you're then going to bring your left foot, same thing, sole of the left foot is facing up, and I'm crossing one ankle over the other. And I personally find that the hardest thing about this pose is that my ankle bones are kind of touching and rubbing each other, and it's really uncomfortable for me. So I don't totally love to do this pose, even though it feels fine for my knees and fine for my hips. But again, not every pose is meant for everyone. And just let your hands rest on your knees. Take a few breaths here. And just see how the pose makes you feel. Let's try the other side. So you can wiggle left toes out, right toes out, and we'll switch. And you might notice it's totally different on the other side. So left foot crosses over the top of the right thigh, maybe holding here, or crossing right foot over the left. Sitting up nice and tall. Three to 5 breaths here in the pose. And let's release. Wiggle that foot out and the other, and come all the way down onto your back. So lowering down, walk your feet out and let your knees fall in towards one another here. So countering all of our external hip rotations by doing a gentle internal hip rotation. A great way to just gently reset. Bring your arms to your sides, turn your palms to face up. Bring your heels in, coming into bridge pose. Push down into the feet, curl tailbone up, lift your hips, low back and mid back off the floor. Hug in through the midline, really engage through the adductors. Also a great counter pose. And you're welcome to stay here. You can progress a little further by shrugging your shoulders underneath you and either interlacing the fingers to push into the back of the arms, or you can bring your palms underneath your low back and underneath your pelvis. Three breaths. Releasing the arms, unwrap, nice and slow. And releasing down. Let's take a laying spinal twist before closing in Shavasana. Reach your arms out to the sides, and you can move your hips over to the right before letting both knees drop down to the left, either stacking one on top of the other, or you can wrap your right thigh over the left one. Uncross the legs, lift the knees back up, and we'll switch sides. Move your hips over to the left. Let your knees drop down over to the right, either letting your left thigh stack on top of the right one or wrapping the left leg over. Try to ground your left shoulder to the mat. Uncross your legs. Coming into Shavasana, your final resting pose. Taking a very well-deserved rest. Widening the feet away from each other. Turning your palms to face up to the sky and closing your eyes. And let your awareness settle into your hips, pelvis, low back, knees even. And just notice what has shifted for you in this practice, what feels different. And simply breathe into it. Breathe a little deeper. Waking back up, wiggling fingers and toes, turning your head side to side. Take a great big stretch, reaching your arms up overhead. And we'll come up to take a seat, just roll to one side, lift on up. Noticing how you feel now, as opposed to when you first stepped onto your mat. Bring your hands together at the front of your heart. We'll close our practice with the chant of Om one time, inhaling to chant. Breathe in. Namaste. Thank you so much, yogis. I hope you enjoyed this lotus flow. I would love to know how this worked out for you and if you noticed a difference by preparing with all of these hip openers and how your body feels now, if you think that you'll be able to continue practicing lotus pose or whether you're choosing to leave that out of your practice, which is perfectly fine. I honestly very rarely practice lotus pose myself, but as long as you really work on the external hip rotation, it should be okay. But for some people, it's just never really going to be a pose that feels very good, and that's okay too. We are not all meant to contort ourselves into human pretzels, and that's not really the point of yoga anyway. So thank you so much for watching and participating in this class with me. If you are new to my channel, please do subscribe. I put out new classes every single Thursday. Have a wonderful day. Namaste.